And in acknowledging our best self and my staff, I'd like to pay particular acknowledgement to you, Jeremy, you're here today, in getting this award, particularly for the ICAC work we did. I just want to put your name on the table and say thank you for the enormous amount of work that went with that particular bit of legislation. Nick, I know the Greens are here today, and I know in the Senate you took our legislation and you introduced it and you got it through, which I'm so pleased about, because that's what you like to see, is your work being value added to and made better across party lines. And I'd also just like to make one other comment about the Speaker. Speaker in particular, that bit of legislation and that week. I don't think you, but Rebekha certainly would, have any idea what it meant to be an independent when that Tuesday morning legislation, when the manager of government business rang me up and said, we're going to do this. The Attorney General rang me up and said, I think you need to be down in my office immediately as we run through it. And the pressure to support the government with that bit of legislation was just enormous. Like they called, the Constitution was going to come down on our head if we let that bit of legislation go through as the Attorney General wanted it. So calling on your staff, calling on your principles, calling on your best practice, calling on the rigour of your policies and procedures was essential to be able to make a decision to go with what you in fact did, was gave the decision to the House. So I also would like to acknowledge that. But also put on the record the role that the independents have in that particular decision, because it was our vote that made the difference there. But talking about independence and issues, what I would like to bring to today's discussion, one particular issue that's still a standout for my community and called me to act above and beyond any amount of courage or integrity that I had. And I'd like to bring into the Parliament today an organisation called Rural Australians for Refugees. There are 9 groups in my electorate, and they gave me curry from the very beginning to the very end, that I wasn't doing enough, that I should do more, that it was beyond sensible what was happening to people on Manus and Nauru. And I constantly told them that I was doing everything I could, and they constantly told me, well, that wasn't good enough. So, in accepting this award, I'm calling on the Commonwealth Government to reassess its position on asylum seekers held in indefinite detention in the Pacific. The government, in my opinion, should accept the offer from New Zealand and ensure that those asylum seekers unable to go to the US, who are not going to be settled in Australia, are allowed to go to New Zealand. The so-called Pacific solution is too expensive. It is detrimental to our relationships with our neighbours and the moral fibre of our nation. Indefinite detention, particularly on the Pacific Islands, has been going on for too long, and there's no end in sight. In September, I visited Papua New Guinea and Manus and heard appeals from the community and the faith groups, including the Catholic Church, for Australia to end what the locals described as a humanitarian crisis. And I have particular concerns for the 53 asylum seekers who remain detained and isolated in the prison facility in Port Moresby under heavy security. Colleagues, integrity is a virtue, and it is a virtue for all of us in public office to aspire to. And people of integrity know when justice, compassion and mercy are of greater service to the nation than force, fear and punishment. So in accepting this award, for which I too am very grateful, I bring the voice of all the rural Australians for refugees and the many other faith groups around this country who ask of our government, could we please act with the Australian values of justice, compassion and mercy? And if the asylum seekers cannot come to Australia, could we please accept the offer from New Zealand? Thank you.